Political realism is also called realpolitik, and it's the dominant historical paradigm in international relations. And this goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks. We find evidence there. We find evidence at different periods throughout our, Western history, but global history too. Realism best explains conflict, defense, and national security. And that is because it is based on the idea of power. Political realists believe that the driving force in international relations is power politics. They contend that the struggles between nation states to secure their conflicting national interests are the main actions on the world stage. They hold that politics is aimed at increasing power, keeping power, and demonstrating or using power. And one of the criticisms of realism is that everything else takes a lesser place politically, such as trade, environmental issues, humanitarian issues, cooperation with other nation states. Power is the key focus, and for realists, we're talking about military power dominantly, but also economic power vis-a-vis other nation states. Power is defined very simply as the ability to influence another country's political behavior. It is defined as the ability to get others to do what they normally wouldn't do. And a nation state is powerful to the extent that they influence other nation states more than others influence them. Realists contend that countries and their leaders therefore must base their policies on sort of a Darwinian survival of the fittest existence, in which power is the key to a nation state's survival. Good foreign policy, not all foreign policy, but good foreign policy, according to realists, is based on the principles of power politics. If we look at classical realism, we'll see three basic assumptions: that all countries have a power seeking nature. That is, in order to fulfill their interest, in order to influence others more than they are influenced by others, they have to not just have a level of power higher than or relatively equal to others, but they have to continue to seek that power. Another assumption is self-interested rationality. This is that countries base their decisions, base their foreign policy on their own individual self-interest, not necessarily thinking about the interest of other countries or always the consequences of their self-interest. But they add this idea of rationality to it. Self-interest is getting what you want, but being rational about it may curb how you seek to achieve your self-interest and what you may accept as your self-interest. Because if you go out for your ultimate goal and you see it as unachievable, rationally, then you might anticipate you're going to fail if it's unachievable. And then you have gotten nothing to fulfill your self-interest. So oftentimes, this idea of self-interest is bounded by rationality, what you can achieve. States seek to maximize their foreign policy decisions based on what they know to be real and factual. Countries act prudently, wisely, rationally, and according to realists, good foreign policy minimizes the risks and maximizes the benefits of self-interest for the nation state. This idea of rationality is similar to weighing the costs and the benefits of a foreign policy action and pursuing that which you can achieve and which is in your greatest benefit. We'll talk about this a little bit more deeply in Section 4 in Foreign Policy Decision Making. Another assumption of realism is called state centrism. Realists assume that nation states are the most important players in global politics. States protect their power and their national security by maximizing the power of the country, of the nation state. And they calculate their interest in terms of the power of the country. This leaves aside or downplays other international actors, non-state actors such as interest groups, terrorist organizations, multinational corporations, international organizations. All of these, according to realists, are less important and less influential than a country's focus on its self-interest and its power. A variant of realist theory is called neorealism or structural realism, and it focuses on the international system structure and explaining the behavior of nation states. And ultimately it focuses on the idea that the international system is anarchic. Anarchy is not chaos. It is not complete breakdown of rules or laws. But anarchy in the international relations sense is the idea that there's no powerful entity higher than that of individual nation states. And so individual nation states, in seeking their own self-interest and power, are the ultimate powers and actors in the world. International law exists, international organizations exist, but they're not powerful enough or uniform enough or cohesive enough in order to keep powerful nation states from doing what they want to, or keep all nation states from doing what they want to. Another element of the international system, that which influences nation states' behavior, is that all countries have similar functions. And I have this mouthful of a terminology here, unit functional homogeneity. Well, that basically means that all countries act the same in basic ways. And so then, we can say that any country around the world has a concern about establishing and maintaining their security. All countries have a concern about establishing and maintaining a viable economic system. And all countries have a concern about the welfare and the well-being of their own populations. Now, all of these are done to a greater or lesser extent, but all countries have these basic similar functions. The difference between countries is their ability to achieve those. And this comes in that third point. Power is based on what scholars call a distribution of capabilities. What you can do as a nation state depends on your military and economic power. So all countries find themselves in an ungoverned world, anarchy. All countries have the same basic functions or desires, but it is their power that determines what they can do and when they can do it. Not just their power, but other nation states' power relative to theirs. So the author of this theory, Kenneth Waltz, focuses primarily on this third element because it's the only variable, but he also focuses on the effects of international anarchy as being an important driver for the foreign policies of nation states. So let's look at what this means. Anarchy implies that there's a lack of a central government that can act as a rule or law enforcer at the international level to settle disputes among nation states equally. In the international system, there is no world government that can treat all countries equally. No one to solve disputes. No international police force. After all, countries can't be arrested. No international military that would treat all others the same, absent politics. And this is very different than the politics of domestic governments. In a domestic political situation, there are central governments, there are sets of uniform laws, there are police forces and other law enforcement, there are court systems that are effective. And so if I steal something, if I kill someone, I'll most likely be caught and go to jail. And this deters me from breaking the law. Domestic governments, at least those who are stable, have a monopoly on the power and the enforcement of laws. There are definite consequences and punishments for improper and immoral behavior. But there's a vast difference between a domestic legal structure and what goes on in international relations. There is no effective law enforcement at the international level. There is no effective international court system. There is no effective then rule enforcement. And so then, countries can do whatever they want to as long as they have the power to get away with it. This is what international anarchy means. The politics among nations in the international system is the politics then of the ungoverned. And this has consequences for the behavior of countries. All nation states must depend on themselves. This is the precept of self-help. Nations must set and achieve their own goals. A country's interests are as it defines them, and no nation state can realistically rely on another or their alliances to take care of its welfare, unless it's in the other nation state's interests. So if nobody's going to help you, you have to help yourself. The same goes for the second point, self-preservation. All nation states must protect and defend their own physical security. The security of a nation state is its ability to keep another country from harming it physically or invading it. It is what we call in the current vernacular the protection of one's homeland. Each nation state must take into account, if it wants to protect itself, its own relative short-term advantages versus other countries. And if we talk about neo-realism or structuralism, and we talk about this idea of power, that idea of relative advantage or relative power versus others is very important. How do you judge yourself? Well, it depends on how you judge others. Are you more powerful than them militarily, economically? In that way you can influence them. Or are you less powerful? In that way they can influence you. And so one of the consequences of anarchy, this governmentless international system, is that countries have to focus on their short-term relative advantage versus other countries. This is going to supersede any long-term collective good. Anarchy compels leaders and nation states to be short-sighted and self-interested. And thus, self-interest becomes the guide for behavior of countries. Instead of being nice, you have to be self-interested. Instead of being benevolent and giving, you have to be self-interested. And so state egoism is the driver of behavior instead of state altruism. Why would a country trade their short-term advantage for any long-term collective good, such as getting rid of nuclear weapons? That might be a long-term collective good. The world may be better off without them. But if you're a country that wants to see that good in the world, you also have to think about other countries and what they can do and the power they have. You may think that having no nuclear weapons is a good thing, but a country is not necessarily going to give them up as long as other countries still maintain them, because that means another country will have power over yours. And this feeds into that fourth point. Countries in an anarchic world environment are in a condition called strategic interdependence. Nations cannot plan their strategies or act in the world without considering or anticipating the strategies and their reactions of others. Nations must take into account the military power and the economic power of other countries. And you must be prepared to deal with the consequences of other nation states' actions. No country has complete control over its future. What it can do depends on what others can do. Power it has depends on what power others have. And this is the idea of interdependence. You are relative to other nation states. You act and react to other nation states. There's this interplay politically, but when we place it in the context of realism, the focus is on power and the security and the protection of your country, and so therefore it becomes strategic. And the idea is that a nation state's leaders don't have the option of not playing this game. They must take the strategies and actions of other countries seriously in order for their own country to maintain its power and to survive. The worst actor in the world, the worst nation state in the world, sets the rules of the game, acts as a lowest common denominator, and we thus have to react to their bad behavior. And in reacting to other nation states' bad behavior, in wanting to protect our own power and place in the world, we get this fifth point, or consequence of international anarchy. Nation states cannot afford to be moral. International laws exist. There is an international court system. There are rules. But international laws are broken with little or no consequence. And a country must be prepared to deal with the consequences of other countries' actions, whether they be moral or immoral. If there is no government higher than that of individual nation states, international laws cannot be easily enforced. International laws do exist and reflect the common self-interests of participant nations. But with no world government or no world police force to enforce these rules, nations in the international system do not have then a uniformity, or at least a uniform application of legal beliefs and what is right and wrong, legal or illegal. And so then, in dealing with the bad behavior of another nation state, you can't afford to be moral. You have to focus on yourself, your self-interest, what's best for you. Each of these 5 points makes force and security and military power a prominent issue. The presence of anarchy in the international system creates what scholars call a security dilemma. This is where nation states increase their defense capabilities in the hope of defending themselves, but other countries see this as aggression, and then they take measures to increase their own security. Well, what's the other country going to do? Increase its security too. And so it creates this standoff based on power, based on military might in the world as nation states seek to exercise their power or keep their power in the world. So what consequences does this have for our foreign policy? Well, this makes us focus on national security. It makes us focus on military power, not just ours, but others. This leads to high military and intelligence spending, funding other countries militarily, building and maintaining security organizations and security treaties with other countries. It makes us focus on our position in the world, our power in the world relative to other nation states. Ultimately, it leads us to not trust other countries. If anarchy exists, if there is no government or power there to keep other countries in line, we can't necessarily trust that they're going to do the right thing. And one other consequence is that it leads to a unilateral approach to our foreign policy. If you go back to those precepts of self-help and self-preservation, the idea of rational self-interest, thinking about your own power versus others, your own place, your relative short-term position versus others. You can't necessarily always trust other nation states. You have to do this for yourself. In the next lecture, we're going to continue talking about realism and other theories that are associated with. That'll be in section 3, lecture 2.